What we're doing today is we're holding an annual event called the Day in the Trenches. Today we're hoping that the visitors who come here get an experience of how the soldiers lived while training, what was it like behind the lines in the headquarters. They'll get some demonstrations on bayonet training, how to defend themselves. There'll be the trench routine in how the soldiers conducted themselves in the training, in the trenches or during the actual fighting. There are some temporary exhibits. Today we have a private collector who wants to remain anonymous, has a beautiful collection of World War I German firearms. And it's a welcome addition to what's on this side. You know, we have a nice collection of Canadian military, but it's nice to see what the enemy used, and he brought it out today. And there's also a special exhibit on the paper war. We call it papers, documents, posters of Canada in the First World War. So there's sheet music, there's letters, there's diaries on exhibit today. Plus there's also the museum in the basement, where we have a gentleman who came all the way from Saskatchewan, from Regina Military Museum, to manage the museum in the basement. The museum was formed back in 2013, and we've tried to hold a Heritage Day every year. We got shut down in COVID twice, but we're back. We're looking forward to it. And of course, the crowds that are here, we're very pleased with seeing people. Now, the history of Manitoba and the Great War. Now, you may think, well, it's not really that big a deal. I mean, it was London, Berlin, and Paris were the main fighters. And well, the reality was our community of Manitoba sent 80,000 soldiers. Please come. Sent over 80,000 soldiers to the Great War, and of which 8,000 didn't come home. And that may not sound that big a number considering the millions died in the Great War. But the reality is it affected every community in Manitoba, whether it was Swan Lake, Roland, Manitou, Plum Coulee. They all sent their children, you know, many of those communities sent their children to war. And of that 80,000, 8,000 didn't come home. It's as relevant here as it is out in Vimy Ridge. You know, that every community we lost our children. And, you know, one of the great killers, I'll just sequence into this, one of the great killers in the First World War, 2 out of the 3 soldiers wounded or killed was with artillery. That is a 18-pounder artillery shell. It either carried shrapnel balls or high explosives and designed to explode into many pieces. Now I'm going to send you out 2 pieces with that cannon shell. I want all 3 back. But you're going to get an idea when that shell would explode that it would have some serious killing power. Pass them down and don't drop them on your kid's sister.
You want to hold that? Can you hold it? Oh, you're strong.
And of course, this is where I stress this is the only place you get to touch the artifacts, because you're not going to be allowed to touch them in the museum. Yeah, I'll take a pink one. That would be great to have something with sweet. Thank you. The water girl. Anyways, the great killer was artillery, but back in 1914, the soldiers trained with generals that had the idea that they still fought the war like the Civil War. You lined them up and you sent them over the field and faced the enemy. Well, unfortunately, you had the killing power of that artillery round, 12 shells a minute, instead of putting a cannonball down the cannon shell, you know, taking 2. Imagine 12 of those rounds coming off a minute. And then here's this, the Lee Enfield rifle, a trained soldier in the Canadian Army, whether he was from the country or from the city, he was taught to fire up to 15 rounds a minute. Now you have 1,000 of your friends in the trenches. You're able to throw out a minute, 15 bullets a minute, rapid fire. Now you'll be able to touch this rifle too. It's welded shut, so no one's going to shoot themselves in the foot. Just don't drop it on your kid sister's foot. You hear me? So anyways, a soldier was able to fire, like I said, 15 rounds a minute. But the problem is, if you look on his package, on his package here, his uniform, he carried 220 rounds. That's all he carried into battle. So that's less than 15 minutes of firepower. So you better hope you win within the first 15 minutes. But actually there was, you know, for every guy doing the fighting, there was at least 2 guys bringing up more ammunition, you know, into the line. So, but the killing power was so great that in the first 4 months of the war, the French army lost 400,000 soldiers in the first, by December 1st. Not wounded, dead. And usually when there's dead, there's 3 wounded. So it gives you an idea. And it broke the heart of these soldiers in many ways. Here's these antiquated generals sending them attack, you know, bravery. All you need is some bravery and get over the top, you know, and they were cut down in swaths. So the soldiers then naturally decided to hit the ground and start scraping at the ground to get a little trench started, and that's how trench warfare started. From the Swiss border to the North Sea, over 800 kilometers of trenches were dug, networks of them. They took shelter. It was like a form of siege warfare. And anyways, with that happening, this the trenches, well, when you have 2 million soldiers on each side, it's not very hard to dig your share of 5 feet. You know, and so it quickly evolved into that. It was a protective mechanism. So we found other ways to try to kill the soldiers. You know, they found mortars. You'll see some other demonstrations today found in the battlefield outside of Vimy Ridge. The handle's missing on it. This here is a shovel, an entrenching tool that the Canadians would have had. It was found on a battlefield in the Somme. You guys are passing them by, you're not just pocketing them. Good, good. This here is a Lee Enfield bayonet found in the battlefield of the Vimy Ridge. Like farmers today, they keep picking rocks. Well, the farmers out there keep finding things like this and selling them in flea markets and things.
And so whose gun was
that? Will fit a British Lee Enfield, Canadian, yes.
And the Mauser was German?
German, yes. And this here was found in Belgium in Passchendaele. And this is a Ross rifle, a Canadian-made Ross rifle.
Okay.
All rusted up. Now, what I want to stress about this, what I want to stress about these items you're handling right now, to me that's a living history memorial. These soldiers, if they had lost that kit, they would have been charged. But most good soldiers knew how to keep their equipment in good order. These soldiers fell in battle. You know, no grave, no, you're handling something that someone had and did not finish the war. And that's, to me, so, it has more meaning than a lot of the stuff that you will see in the museum when you get down there, to actually physically touch something that probably the soldier died in battle.
Combat?
This one might have, but it's dated 1915 and it's welded shut. And this is a good example of the bayonet you were handling there.
Okay, yeah.
You look pretty sinister with it. You know, you just hope that the person you're facing, you know, didn't have the training you might have had, you know. My luck, I'd had 6 weeks training going into battle, and the guy across from me has, you know, 10 years experience and probably put me flat on my ground faster than I knew. But anyways, this is the business end. This, when you run out of bullets and you're still in the attack, you would use this. It wasn't just used for opening can of beans. So,
was a German rifle. What kind of rifle did the Allies use?
well, that's a Canadian rifle. That's a Lee Enfield.
So that's Canadian.
Yeah, Canadians started off with the Ross rifle. There's an example in the museum.
Okay.
But apart from that, then they used the Lee Enfield because it was poorly made. The Canadian Ross rifle kept falling apart. It jammed. And they were, during the heat of battle, they were taking 2 or 3 guys where all they did was opening up the bolts because they were overheated with using hammers or, you know, to open them up and reload for one guy firing. So it wasn't trusted, the battle, you know, and after the battle, that particular battle, they found that once the British got involved, they found that Canadians at the end of the battle were carrying 3,000 British rifles because they didn't trust that rifle, the Ross rifle. And so the Canadians at that point, you know, the general wanted to scrap all the rifles. General wanted to scrap all the rifles and replace with Lee Enfields, and the government kind of said no. And then they ended the argument. Well, the Canadians threw them away on the battlefield because they don't trust the weapon. Yeah. And it failed them there on the battlefield. So at that point, we started using the Lee Enfield. But the Canadian rifle was used as a sniper rifle. It was reputed to be a good target rifle. Any questions besides that?
On the Ross rifle, was it manufactured in Canada?
Quebec.
So that was the reason there was the vested interest that it was Canadian?
No, the reason why is back in the Boer War, when they were making the law, before the Boer War and after the Boer War, they were making the Lee Enfield only in England, and Canada wanted to start its own armament industry, and they wouldn't give them a license to make the Lee Enfield here, so they made their own, and it's patterned after the Austrian rifle, you know.
Okay.
But they kept them for the Second War for the Home Guard. Okay.